Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Rita Chaudhary of the Department of Ancient Indian History and Culture, University of Calcutta. Our subject of discussion today is Indian culture. The paper is on Indian polity and the module is Niti Shara of Kamandaka. Now before we begin, I would like to mention that we have discussed the Artha Shastra and the Manusri Manava Dharma Shastra in this context, and we have seen that though there was no formal school of political philosophy in early India, we have texts which prove the fact that the science of statecraft was amply advocated and studied, and so now we go on to a new work, the Niti Shara of Kamandaka, which also contains similar and dissimilar pronouncements about polity and statecraft. Now, the learning objectives of studying this module is to understand that it was an original treatise on politics written in Sanskrit verse. We have to know about its date, its chapters and contents, and it being an important social science where Vatta has taken a significant position. Then we analyze the different aspects of political thought. In the introduction, we will see what a significant and a unique treatise was the Kamandaka of Niti Shara. Kamandaka's Niti Shara is a treatise on politics written in Sanskrit verse consisting of 20 shargos or cantos subdivided into 36 prokaranas. It discusses the principles according to which a king should rule his kingdom and how he could attain paramountcy and prosperity for himself and his subjects. It is noticeable that although the Artha Shastra and Niti Shara have major overlaps in contents and concerns and share a common political vocabulary, there is also much that is different. Now, this is what we would like to point out. We have seen that there are similarities between the two texts, the aspects that they describe, but there are certain differences which we would like to point out in this module. As for instance, a detailed discussion of internal administration and civil and criminal law are missing in the Niti Shara, as is the advocacy of strict state control over various aspects of economy, often considered the hallmark of the Artha Shastra. Other aspects highlight the fact that the Niti Shara was not an unoriginal derivative text, repeating the ideas of the Artha Shastra, though Kamandaka hails Vishnugupta as his guru. Now, we can understand that it is important to deal with the Kamandaka of Niti Shara separately, because though we may find a lot of similarities in the describing the political concepts and the various aspects of polity, there are certain differences which we would like to point out. But before we go on further, we would like to deal on the different thoughts about the date of the text. Now, it is difficult to ascertain when and where the Niti Shara was written. Estimates of its age generally range from the 1st and the 7th centuries CE. The evidence cited to suggest the contemporaneity of the Niti Shara with the Gupta Emperor Chandragupta II, datable to c. 375 to 415 CE, is not convincing. A more cautious approach, placing the text between c. 500 to 700 CE, is more acceptable, and the Niti Shara can thus be situated at the threshold or the advent of the early medieval period. Dr. Rajendra Lal Mitro, in its preface to the Nitishar of Kamandaka, observes, I quote, "A work of the like title was taken to the island of Bali by the Hindus, who emigrated thither about the beginning of the Christian era. Nothing is more is known about the date." So, interestingly, we notice that all the texts that have been discovered cannot be precisely dated, because there have been interpolations, and from the style of writing within the internal evidence of the text, the style of writing that we notice gives different dates, suggests that different dates can be assigned to the text concerned. Now we go on to what the Nitishara contains. The chapters include, the contents of the Nitishara are presented in the following way. The first chapter is devoted to the inculcation in princes of the necessity of study and of controlling their passions. The second chapter deals with the division of learning, the duties of different castes, and the importance of criminal jurisprudence. In the third chapter occurs an exposition of the princes to the subjects of the necessity for impartial justice and the impropriety of tyrannizing over the people. The fourth offers a description of the essential constituents of good government. The fifth chapter is concerned with the duties of ministers and servants. The subject of the sixth chapter deals with the mode of removing difficulties, or rather of punishing the wicked. The seventh chapter is devoted to the duty of guarding the persons of the king and the crown princess. It includes a variety of expedients against surprise, poisoning, the infidelity of servants, wives and relatives, and the dishonesty of the medical attendants. The subject matter of the 8th chapter consists of the mode of consolidating a kingdom by providing it with necessary officers of state and including within it a number of dependencies and subordinate chiefs. The 9th to 12th chapters are a series of rules regarding negotiations and disputes with foreign powers, conferences, embassies, and spies. The 13th opens with an exhortation in favor of constant activity and attention to business and the evils which attend illness and vicious propensities. Other chapters are devoted to the 7 limbs of state, military expeditions, fortifications, and other aspects of warfare. So, we notice that very widely the contents of all the 3 texts that we have already discussed are quite similar, but the mode of arrangement is different in all the 3 texts, and in this Nitishar of Kamandaka, we find that he has given a comprehensive description of all the aspects of what a good government needs to do, and what a strong state, and all the significance of having a strong state power. Now, along with this, we go on to whether what kind of a social science that existed during the period and the importance of Varta or economy in this connection. Out of the 4 divisions of knowledge, namely Anvikshaki, Troyi, Varta and Dandoniti, the term Varta is given due significance by Kamandaka, as it was considered by him as very essential for the welfare of society. Now we just describe in very short what the four knowledge systems of knowledge mean, because we have already done it in our other modules, but we just give a short description. Anvikshaki deals with the knowledge of the self, Troi with piety and impiety, Varta with gain and loss of wealth, Danduniti with justice and injustice. Kamandaka is of the opinion that in the absence of Danduniti, the remaining has no place and existence. The king protects those who add to the income of the state by providing taxes, but Vatta protects those who profess it. Therefore, without Vatta, this world is unable to survive in the same way as a person cannot survive without breathing. Vatta has been defined as the occupation of the Vaishyas, which are cattle rearing, cultivation and trade. A man proficient in Vatta is secure even in difficult circumstances. The text, when it speaks about economy, describes the eightfold means of prosperity to the kingdom: agriculture, communication to facilitate commercial traffic, entrenchment of strongholds for soldiers in the capital, construction of dams along rivers, erection of enclosures for elephants, working of mines, felling and selling of timber, and the rehabilitation of inhabitational areas. Now, from what we have already said, we can conclude that as in the other texts, like in the Arthashastra of Kautilya and in the Manava Dharma Shastra, we have noticed that economic activities have been given a great deal of importance, because all our ancient thinkers were aware of the fact that a government cannot function without a strong treasury. So, all kinds of economic activities are given great importance. It's not that like in the Arthashastra, he strongly professes the king's control over all the sources of revenue. But anyway, we find in the other texts too that the Vatta, it has been advocated that people should follow their profession as ordained by the norms of society. So, this is where we find a great deal of similarity in thought amongst the three ancient thinkers. We will go on to an exposition of aspects of political thought found in the Kamandaka Nitishara. Now here we find that all the texts mention that there must be 7 constituent elements of the state, because without them a state cannot function. It may be that the relative importance of the 7 elements of the state have not been clearly stated as in the Kautilya's Arthashastra, but we find mention of them as in the Nitishara. An analysis of the relative importance of the 7 elements of the state have been mentioned. So we find the Swami, the king, the Amatta or the minister, the Rashtra or territory. It's not Janapada as we have seen in the Arthashastra. The Rashtra or territory, the Durga or fortification, the Kosha or treasury, the Bolo or the army, and the Shurit or the allies. It's not Mitra as we find in the Arthashastra. So, you must realize that even those 7 elements have been mentioned on all the texts, the terminology is not always similar. Different words have been used, but the idea is the same, that the state must contain 7 constituent elements. Now we can see what kind of importance the Kamundoko, Niti Shara of Kamundoko applies for the Shami and the Kosha. The king is regarded by the author of the Niti Shara as the root of prosperity and progress of the kingdom and the protector of dharma, artha and kam, which he is able to do by discharging his duties according to the rules of polity. The king is regarded as a source of subsistence to all creatures. The preservation, acquisition, augmentation of wealth earned through equitable means and its bestowal on deserving recipients are classed as the duties of a courageous and energetic king. The acquisition of wealth from people, probably in terms of taxation, is prescribed under the strict observation of the injunctions and interdictions of the Shastras. Now, from this we can understand that to have a fulfilled treasury, the king must judiciously collect taxes. Now, about providing special attention to the treasury, kosha, the king is advised to take special care of it as the state solely depends on it economically. Out of a strong treasury, a king is able to maintain official staff, army, forts, friends and allies. The accomplishment of righteous and desirable acts is also possible only with a rich and solvent treasury. The construction of bridges and roads and the flourishing of trade and commerce also proceed from a secure treasury. So, we find this emphasis on a treasury is universally prevalent in all our texts which deal with statecraft and politics, because as we have already seen in the previous modules and in this module, that if they could understand that everything that was needed for good governance was possible only from a secure treasury. Now, about the concept of mandala, we have already seen in the other modules that the other political thinkers of early India were also aware of a concept of mandala, which was structured in accordance with the kingdom that they governed. Now, even in Kamandaka, we find the prevalence of this concept of mandala. Kamandaka devotes the 12th and 13th chapter of his work to the explication of the concept of mandala, which may be translated as the sphere of influence in its political context. Now, just a little bit of explanation of who the Vijigishu Raja is. We find that in the center of the kingdom is the area for the Vijigishu to rule. The Vijigishu is the strongest king, and his intention is to capture more and more places. So we call him the would-be conqueror, so that he can establish his power over his surrounding areas and even in distant areas. Now, according to this concept as expounded in the Niti Shara, we find that the Rajamandala or the mandala consists of 12 kings. 5 kings whose dominions are in front, 4 kings whose dominions are in the rear of his kingdom, the Madhyama, the contiguous corridor states, and Udashina or states which, wherever they may be, owing to their geographical position, are capable of maintaining their neutrality and and desirability of being neither hostile nor friendly. So, the Vijigishu, let me explain a bit about the concept of mandala, though we have already done it in the other modules. So, we see how Kamandaka represents the Raja Mandala. The Vijigishu, being the center of the circle, must strive gradually to widen the circumference so as to envelop a wide territory surrounding his kingdom. The farther the circumference of his sphere of influence is extended, the more remote is the possibility of aggression. Only thus can he preserve the sovereignty and integrity of the state. The king must take steps to protect his sovereignty by constant preparedness and active but subtle efforts towards the expansion of the mandala. Now, just one or two words about what we have already explained. It was necessary for the would-be conqueror or the Vijigishu to maintain his power and his sphere of influence over his neighboring and in areas which were further away of his, from his kingdom, because it was necessary that he can proclaim his power and his strength to his adversaries, so that he can instill fear amongst his enemies. So, how does he deal with his adversaries? While one is dealing with an avowed enemy, Kamandaka justifies the adoption of means which are none too scrupulous, very similar to that of Kautilya, where he says that he can take up any means, resort to any means, just or unjust, to just further his interests. 4 methods of dealing with the inimical states are mentioned: Uchchedano, Apochayo, Pirano, and Koshano. The 4 methods to vanquish the enemy can be portrayed literally thus: attempts, forcing him to quit his territory; the undermining of the enemy's strength by sowing dissensions among his best supporters; harassment of all kinds; destruction of property and military resources; and cutting off communication and food supply; and finally, possible assassination. Assassination completes this grim picture of the treatment of the enemy. The Vijigishu may resort to all possible means of winning over to his side an ally common to him and his enemies. Now, we have seen how in the mandala, the Vijigishu is trying to spread his influence over surrounding and over areas further from him. We have seen how the Vijigishu in the mandala will always try to extend his influence over his neighboring areas and even in territories further away from him. We have seen an exposition of how he was to deal with his adversaries. Now we go on to a description of the nature of the Vijigishu, because he is the most important person in the mandala. As a preface to the function of the sovereign as the pivot of the mandala, Kamandaka analyzes the nature of the sovereign who deserves the appellation of the Vijigishu. Lack of enthusiasm, love of sloth, and paucity of energy are the most insidious foes of a sovereign. Constant alertness, watchfulness of the activities of his officers, the capacity to feel the pulse of his nation, of which he is the arbiter, are necessary factors in the composition of the king's nature. These natural inclinations must have been trained by a systematic physical, intellectual, and moral discipline. He must have acquired a general acquaintance with all departments of learning and be an example to his subjects. Therefore, lack of general education of a fairly high order renders the king inefficient to that extent. This education must be supplemented by the knowledge of military science. Added to all this, what constitutes the essence of his kingship is his knowledge of his duties and responsibility, which is said to consist in, quote, the act of cherishing his subjects, unquote. Now, we have explained the nature of the Vijikeshu, what is expected of him. So, what the emphasis that has been given here is on education and his being acquainted with a variety of subjects in a state over which he was to rule and extend his power. Now, we go on to another aspect of the Vijikeshu, is how the policy of mutual dependence comes in at this context. Kamandaka compares the king to an expert farmer who, intent on reaping a rich harvest, secures his field of crop by enclosing it with thorny plants and protects by freely using the cudgel against thieves and beasts that comes to destroy it. Likewise, a king should protect his own kingdom against aggressors. Softness, timidity, weakness in these respects will imperil the state. The tie between the subjects and the king is so close that one sustains the other. It is a case of mutual dependence. The king protects his subjects from harm and provides conditions for the free development of their capabilities through a social milieu, and in their turn they sustain the king by the payment of their services and taxes. This is beautifully expressed by Kamandaka when he says, quote, a florist both tends and sprinkles water on his plants and culls flowers from them, unquote. It is not the individual lust for conquest, but the desire for increasing prosperity of his kingdom that makes him launch on his military campaign against actual and potential enemies. So we have seen that in the Kamandaka's Nitishara, a large number of political principles have been discussed, which seem to be similar to those that have been provided in the other texts. But there are very minute differences between the principles that have been advocated, which we will be going into, which we have already dealt with, that the centralized government that Arthashastra prescribes is not available in the Niti Shastra of Kamandaka. Now, about the Vijikeshu Raja, it is his opinion that the Raja is not only a conqueror, he conquers other kingdoms to secure his treasury so that he can carry on his welfare activities for the beneficence of his subjects. Now, it is noticeable that the long deliberative sections on war advocating extreme caution suggests the despondency of a political thinker like Kamandaka, who disapproved of the frequent destructive warfare that marked his time. That this disapproval was part of Kamandaka's larger convictions related to the violence and non-violence is evident from his view on capital punishment. In his opinion, Pranantika Dando or capital punishment should be avoided even for the gravest offence, with the exception of the most serious one, namely Raja Poharu, that is usurpation. Again, contrary to Kautilya's view, royal hunt is viewed as the worst of the royal vices, and is disapproved of not only on the grounds of expediency but also on the grounds that it involves moral weakening of the king and death of the hunted animals. These radical points of view have, strangely enough, hitherto gone unnoticed in works on ancient Indian political thought, which have incorrectly presented Niti Shara as a feeble, versified echo of the Arthashastra. So, we find that even if most of the principles which have been adumbrated previously by Kautilya and Monu are repeated again in the Niti Shara of Kamandaka, there are points which are different from those of the previous texts, but these have not been given too much of notice by our scholars. Now, I think a little more elaboration is still needed. In each of the 3 modules which I have dealt with, like the Arthashastra, the Manava Dharma Shastra and the Niti Shara of Kamandaka, we have learnt a lot about the various aspects of early Indian polity. They have tried their best to give us an idea on statecraft, and we come to know that statecraft was well cultivated in early India. Now, all the aspects that have been discussed in these modules are very important for understanding the polity in early India. Now, these texts, they form the basis for understanding the future development of early Indian political thought, which we find in the later texts of early India. So I hope that you have understood the importance of the study of the 3 texts for understanding how statecraft was performed in early India, and I hope that you have understood what I have been trying to explain. And if you do need any more explanation in this regard, please visit EPG Pathshala, and I hope you will get all the data that you need. Thank you.